You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 208. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to today's podcast episode. My name is Paula Price. I am a lawyer turned coach for lawyers and the host of this podcast. I am thrilled to welcome you here today to talk about effective legal writing for law students who are spending their first summer at a law firm. We have an incredible guest here to speak with you on that topic. Her name is Amanda Haverstick. And if Amanda is new to you, she is a legal writer, a brilliant legal writer and coach for legal writing. And she has a background as a practicing lawyer. She practiced in big law in New York City for a number of years, as well as in-house at a Fortune 500 company. So not only does she have the writing chops, the passion and the skill for legal writing, she has also exercised those skills in a practical professional context, both that law firm context and the in-house context. So we're thrilled to have her here to speak today. Now, Amanda is a return guest. She was previously on the podcast at episode 157, where she talked about confident legal writing. So if you love hearing from Amanda, which I suspect you will, you're welcome to go back and hear more from her in that episode. Now, today we are going to talk about a number of areas that are specific to that first experience in a law firm. But if you are not a summer student, I would encourage you to still listen. If you are a law student thinking about applying to a law firm and you want a heads up about what you can expect, by all means, this episode will be helpful for you. And if you're already practicing, right? Maybe you're already an articling student, or you're a new associate or an associate in your early years of practice, everything that we talk about today is relevant to you. And so you might find that you learn some new tips and tricks, that you have a shift in perspective, you learn some new tools. So by all means, you are welcome to listen. And I think you'll really find a lot of value in today's episode. What we talk about the difference between writing in a law school environment, so that academic setting, versus writing in a more professional, practical setting, so the law firm environment. We talk about some of the common mistakes that law students make and that new lawyers make. And we also talk about how to rebuild trust if and when you make a mistake. We talk about how to deal with perfectionism and writer's block. And then finally, how to develop your legal writing skills faster. So Amanda shares a number of strategies and resources that you can use to develop your writing skills. Now, before I turn you over to my interview with Amanda, I would love to share with you that there are a couple of opportunities that I've created to help support summer students make that transition from law school to law firm this summer. I've created a 2-part webinar series. It is a free series. You are more than welcome to attend if you're a summer student and this is your first summer at a law firm, or again, if you are a law student and this is something that you're thinking about for the future, or you're already at a law firm and you're looking for some additional tips and tricks, or maybe you're in a talent management role and you're curious to hear what I have to share on the topic. By all means, please do join us. It's free to register. There will be information in the show notes that accompany this recording for you to register. It'll be on Zoom. It's in a webinar format, so you're welcome to attend and attend anonymously. A lot of people like to be there, but not necessarily be in a meeting format. And if you're familiar with the different Zoom rooms, sometimes the meeting format is everybody's there, your names are on the screen. This is the more private webinar setting, if that's important to you. So that first webinar will take place on Friday, May 16th at noon Pacific time. So just a couple of days after this episode goes live. And it's all about the pillars of practice. So I will be teaching you 3 foundational pillars of your practice that I'd encourage you to start thinking about in your first summer and that you can then apply as you continue through your legal career. So we will talk specifically about career strategy and goal setting. So what to focus on over the course of your summer. You are going to learn about networking and relationship building and how to create a market for your work. Your market for your work really is the lifeblood of your professional work. And so I'm going to give you some tips on how to build a market for your work. And then we're also going to talk about time and practice management. So that looks a little bit different in a law firm relative to a law school context. So I'm going to help support you in how to think about your time and practice in a way that will set you up for success. Now, the second webinar will take place on Friday, May 23rd at 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time, so an hour earlier than that first webinar. And the second webinar is really about how to implement. So we live in an age where information is easily accessible, and what can be challenging is implementation, taking action. So I'm going to help you take action so that you can become a trusted go-to at your firm. We are going to help you develop your confidence within yourself so that you can learn to feel more confident, really trust yourself, and inspire trust and confidence in others. We will be focusing again on 3 different components. Number 1 is effective communication. So that includes your writing, speaking, nonverbal communication, doing those things in a way that, again, inspires trust in others. We're going to be talking about feedback. So that could be formal feedback like a performance review context, or informal feedback like a comment or markups on a draft, and how you can use that feedback to learn and grow faster. And then finally, we're going to talk about growth mindset. So how you can think about your practice, how you can think about your summer in a way that promotes proactivity so that you feel incentivized to take steps, and also so that you can feel resilient in the event that you come across setbacks and challenges, which most of us will at some point. And so if you are interested in joining me for one or both of those webinars, you are absolutely welcome to join. I am designing the webinars to be inclusive. I think if you are a summer student at a law firm, this will absolutely resonate with you. And it will also resonate with you if you are in your early years of practice and what you're looking for are some tools, some strategies that you can use to really thrive in the environment that you're in. So please do join me for those 2 webinars. I would love to see you. You're welcome to extend the invitation to anybody who you think would want to be there. So with that, I am going to turn you over to the interview with Amanda. I know you're going to love hearing from her. So without further ado, here she is. Amanda, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
This is so much fun. I'm honored to be a second timer.
A second timer. And Amanda, we are going to dive straight in. So the first question that I have for you is legal writing and how you would define it.
I have thought a lot about this. I actually got a question from a student once, and she said, how does one become a legal writer? Which is such a weird way to say it, because once you start law school, I guess you're a legal writer. But legal writing is broad. I mean, it could refer to a nurse writing for a lawyer in a case. It could refer to a letter. It could refer to anything you're doing as a lawyer, or people, paralegals, other people, legal professionals. Narrowly, though, most people think of legal writing as motions and briefs, the type of stuff you file in court that has citations and blue book cites, and that's technical. So broadly, a lot of the stuff that I teach is relevant to both and will be helpful for all forms of it, and will also be very helpful for professional writing, because I think, one thing that may be bigger than adjusting to the legal writing in law firms is adjusting to professional writing. And so it's important to have clear, succinct, just perfect writing in that context.
Gotcha. So this episode is really dedicated to new lawyers, the law students who are starting out at their law firms for the summer. We've got junior lawyers who are maybe in their early years of practice. And when it comes to that legal writing, that writing in a professional context, there are some differences between that and what they have been producing in a law school environment. So in your opinion, what's the main difference between legal writing in a law school environment and legal writing when you step into that law firm environment?
The tone, I find, is more aggressive because when you are advocating for a client, you tend to really start getting into your case and you say things with a type of certainty that law students don't often. A lot of the law school writing, even though you do a brief in the spring, which is advocacy writing, it's still descriptive. And the teachers have you go into long paragraphs about all the facts of the case. And usually lawyers will have 1 or 2 sentences max about a case, and they might not have a sentence at all. They might have a citation. It's quicker and the tone is more aggressive. On that, it's clerks. You think of if you're a judicial clerk, that's great writing training. And it is. It's wonderful training. But I find that they often have the hardest time transitioning to litigation because they're so used to coming at it from such a neutral look at everything vantage point. And litigation is more pointed and really direct.
Thank you. One of the things that we all have in mind when we're writing, whether it's legal writing or other forms of writing, is the person who's at the receiving end of it. We talk about the audience for our writing. And at law school, as you mentioned, it's often a teacher. In a law firm environment, who can you think of as your audience for your legal writing?
I think the most helpful thing is to think of a person that you feel comfortable writing to who doesn't know anything about your case or what you're writing about. Because you may be writing for one partner, but your letter or memo or brief is going to then go to the client, or then it's going to go to the court. If it goes to the court, you're going to have a clerk, which is someone straight out of law school too, who is going to be just your level. And then you're going to have the judge. And the mistake that people make is that they assume that the reader knows a lot more than they do. I mean, it's always sort of the joke, non-lawyers will hear you're a lawyer and start asking you questions, and you have no idea what the answer is because we're not generalists. We don't know all the answers off. We know how to find them out, right? So you've got to remember that your reader is very busy. They're not reading for pleasure. They're reading to extract information from what you've put. And so once you think about your reader, and I like to say, put it in a letter to someone you're teaching. Because if you do that, then you try to communicate clearly because you want them to learn. And if you can get in that mindset, thinking always about your reader and what they're receiving from you first, that will set you up in a great way to write really anything that you have to write.
It's so great. You're reminding me of a couple of things, Amanda. One of them is, I don't know if you ever watched this movie. It was dated, Ricochet with Denzel Washington.
I have heard it and I may have seen it, not in the theater, but watched it at home. I don't remember what it was about, but I love Denzel Washington.
Me too. And to be honest, I don't remember anything about the movie except that he kept saying, explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old. And so what you said now reminds me of that, right? When you're thinking of your audience and how you're explaining something, how do you break it down and make it simple? The other thing that comes to mind for me is advice I received as a junior lawyer, which was often when you're writing to opposing counsel, right? You're writing to them, but you're thinking of the judge. So we would call them Dear Judge letters. So I think that concept, right, of keeping in mind who it is that's going to be ultimately reviewing, whether it's the client who's ultimately receiving the memo, keeping in mind the person who's ultimately reading it is important. And I completely agree with what you said about thinking about how busy they are.
And they got a lot of other things to read. They got a lot of other things they could be doing with their time. And if they don't find if you think of a judge, they have to write a legal opinion and they want to get it right. They have a brief from the plaintiff side and they have a brief from the defendant. Guess whose brief they're going to rely on to write their opinion? The better brief that they can just lift whole paragraphs from. So you want to be thinking of that with that there needs to be an opinion. So how are you getting the judge to your brief to then their opinion? The other last thing I'll say is that you have to remember that once any legal thing that you write should be something called evergreen, in that, 3 years from now, some new associate who's doing research on that same topic finds it. They need to be able to understand it too. So maybe the partner said to you, oh, I'm most interested in this part of it. But, you do the whole analysis, make it a full document that would be helpful for someone, time permitting, and consistent with what the partner wants. But, some of those memos that you'll find and briefs in the bank at your firm will save you so much time. And you got to remember everything you write is going in the file.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When it comes to writing, what are some of the common mistakes that you see among new lawyers, junior lawyers, and lawyers generally in their legal writing?
I would say the biggest mistake is that most people write in passive voice. And it's very common because a lot of the reading we do as lawyers happens to be passive. Another reason is that people are not as confident and sure of what they're writing. So they write a bit passively because that seems safer. So I would say that's probably, the biggest change that one could make to improve one's writing.
Before we go on, and it's funny, I re-listened to our original podcast recently, which is brilliant, by the way. And you gave an example in that episode of the difference between a passive and an active voice. Would you mind giving another example? It could be the same example if you happen to recall the same one or a different one, just to kind of highlight the difference between the active and passive.
Sure. Chocolate is eaten by me is passive. I am eating chocolate. That's active. So it's whether the thing that's getting something done to it comes first in the sentence or whether the person, the actor doing it. And you always want to lead with that person because readers are used to reading sentences where we've got the boy kicking the ball. We've got the boy is the focus. And if you say the ball was kicked by the boy in passive, it's just not the way readers read. And it tends to back up their flow as they're reading. And you always want to be propelling your reader forward, going forward. And so for all those reasons, right, it's also shorter. So you save space, which is always important in legal writing.
I also love that you highlighted this idea of confidence, that the active voice carries more confidence. And that's something that I see lawyers at all stages struggle with, but especially when you're first starting out. Anything you can do to increase your confidence levels and the way that you come across is really helpful. And I totally interrupted you. So you were talking about mistakes.
Oh, another big mistake is pronoun use. And I think that it's great that we're calling some people they instead of he or she now. But it's not okay to call a company a they, because in the US English, which is different from the UK, and I'm not sure about Canada, but a company is an it. So people get a little loosey-goosey with their pronouns, and it's not often clear what it refers to. And in legal writing, it's so critical that everything be clear. And because otherwise, if it's ambiguous, then you could go up and have a litigation over what it means. And then you're losing. So pronouns are something that I find people really need a lot of work on. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is from my days reviewing junior associates' work papers when I was at a law firm, and it can come up in discovery responses or requests. It can come up in anything that has a caption on it where you have a title, plaintiff's brief in support type thing. First is that people use a model, and they'll use a model from a case where there were multiple defendants. So it was a plural S. So the apostrophe goes after the S. And then their case only has one. And for some reason, that mistake is so common, and it's always on the first page. So it looks so bad because it looks like you weren't careful and you kind of blew it off. So that's something I always tell people to be extra careful about. The second thing that also comes from cutting and pasting, and this is going to make me sound really nerdy and technical, but I got to tell you, every partner I've talked to has the same problem. Lawyers or associates cut and paste quotations from Westlaw or Lexis into their brief. But what they don't realize is that the formatting on the apostrophes and the quotation marks is straight up and down in Westlaw, but the default in Word is curly quotes and curly. So then you get this mix where the document is inconsistent, and it looks so terrible. And it looks like you just cut and paste the quote and you didn't even read it. So then they lose confidence. Did they even read this? So those are some that are really important to look out for, because like that first assignment is usually the one where all these errors come up, and they're always right at the beginning.
Absolutely. And I love the attention to detail, right? It really is that persnickety, right? It is which quotation marks are you using? Which apostrophes do they match? So I think it's really great to highlight. It doesn't sound nerdy to me. It sounds correct. And so thank you. And it leads to the next question, which is in terms, and this is especially true, right? When you're starting out at a law firm or you're relatively junior, and this may be the first impression that you're making on a lawyer that you're working with, on a client, on a judge. What are some of the mistakes that you think are most damaging?
I think the most damaging are, one, it looks like you didn't care and you didn't take it seriously. You didn't proofread. You didn't take the time to give the partner a product that was free of errors. And they won't be pissed at the errors. They'll be pissed at your attitude. And that can really put a bad idea in their head about you. And so you need to think about the form and how a document looks and really make sure there's nothing sort of jumping out there, because it can look really sloppy. And when you have sloppy form, people assume you have sloppy thinking. And so it's very easy. And in law firms, it's such a pressure cooker where you always feel like you have to be perfect at everything. But these are things within your control. So I really encourage you to take them seriously. And then on something more substantive, when you're talking about case law, it's critically important that you include a way for the reader to know what the procedural posture was and who won the case. Because if you just have a miscellaneous quote from a case, or you talk about the case and have some quote about what they said that's favorable to you, well, what if that party actually lost and then it was just dicta? So you don't want the partner to have to go read the cases. If the partner doesn't feel confident that they don't have to, because you've done such a thorough, good job that they can trust and not go read the case themselves, that makes work for them, and that will piss them off too.
Absolutely. And you're building that reputation and that trust with the partner or the lawyer, whoever's reading it, when you do that. Going back to that point about the typos, right? And the things that are easy to fix that show that you're taking care. You've probably heard this expression, how you do anything is how you do everything. And it's true. Sometimes we're in a rush. We cut corners in life, right? You can't always do an A+ job, but when you're producing a written product and you're expecting that people will be judging the quality of the product based on whether or not it appears without the typos, etc., it's important to keep that in mind, right?
It matters more than you think. I mean, it may be silly and you're like, oh, but a secretary could fix that. Yeah, sure. But the point is that you didn't have your secretary do it. Why should the partners have to do it? You need to do everything within your power to make something as perfect as that can be. Everyone's going to make mistakes. I've never gone back and read a brief that's, been filed with the court. I always find a typo, and this has been proofed by multiple people at the final draft. So that you are human and you will make mistakes, but don't be sloppy such that you're not even worrying about mistakes, because then it'll be unacceptable.
Agreed. And you can build up that trust bank where if you're delivering consistently quality products and the typo slips in, you've built up that reservoir of trust. It's sort of that relationship of trust. But if that's the first impression, it's harder. It's harder to come back. In terms of mistakes, and we are human, We are going to make mistakes. We are going to make typos. We are going to make mistakes that are bigger than typos. Let's face it. And in your view, what are some ways, like how can you rebuild trust after making a mistake?
Well, the first thing is you just need to own it. Don't make excuses. Don't blame the paralegal. Do never blame the paralegal. I mean, that is just, you blame a paralegal and you are done at a firm. I mean, paralegals are sacred and you never blame a paralegal.
100% agree on both sides of the border. Absolutely.
So don't give, I was tired. I didn't have enough time or whatever. Just say, you are right. I will not make that mistake again. And if you are not sure of exactly what mistake it was, like maybe the partner said, oh, you didn't write these cases in the style I want you to, or whatever, it's something less specific, like a typo, then what you need to do is learn and find out from another lawyer there who will talk to you. Go research it. Go write a memo. You want to really do a snow job? Write a memo to the partner analyzing the substantive mistake you made and how you think it happened and why you will never let it happen again and what you learned in the process, because maybe that'll teach someone else. And then, I don't know, that's kind of a snow job. If I did that in my own time and gave it to a partner, that would be impressive, I think. So just, know that you really need to just own it. And usually though, you may just want to say, okay, it'll kind of blow over, but just don't make it again.
I completely agree. I think lawyers understand that junior lawyers are learning and that they are not fully formed. They're not perfect. None of us is, but starting out, there's learning to be had. And this idea of making mistakes, but then not making the same mistakes is important. I think that's when people start to get concerned, when it's the same mistake over and over, and why is it not being addressed? So thank you for that. In terms of persuasive legal writing, you shared with me that you have a 3-pillar approach, and I was hoping you could share with our listeners what that approach is.
The 3 words are clarity, simplicity, and brevity. Clarity is the holy grail. If your reader is not clear on what you're saying because you're not clear, your reader is not going to trust you. You're going to have no credibility. You're not trying to show off how smart you are with big words and making it complicated. You are trying to make it as simple and clear. The law is so complex. And if you've got to make your writing simple so that the law will be clear, because if your writing is complicated, then your reader may not even figure out what the sentence means, much less what the legal implications are.
Can I pause you here, Amanda?
Yeah.
This is an area where I see a lot of junior lawyers have a hard time. And I think part of the reason why clarity doesn't come is because the confidence isn't there yet, and they may not have the ability or the understanding to explain something clearly because they themselves don't necessarily see it that way. So any thoughts on how a lawyer, a junior lawyer, can enhance the clarity they have when it comes to their writing?
Learn the material better. I mean, if you need to know it cold, it's very hard to write about something you don't understand. I mean, you can't write it. If you don't understand it, you should not be writing about it, because that's almost malpractice. You have to understand it. So if you don't understand it, you got to figure out how to get to understanding. With that said, and this goes a little off topic on, should you outline, should you not outline before writing a brief, but writing is thinking. And I teach myself the area of law by writing about it. That's my sort of scrap paper, and I will write up the cases and I will wrestle with them and I will try to teach it to myself. And then once I understand it, then I'm ready to teach it to someone else and put it in and just start from scratch and write it in my brief or my memo.
Brilliant. I love it. It's like we're going back to the beginning, right? You're talking to a friend. You're explaining it like you're a 2-year-old. So getting that understanding so that you are able to explain it in clear terms. So thank you, Amanda. And I will allow you to continue, please, with your pillars.
Simplicity and brevity are really means to the clarity end, but they're a little different. I tell people you've got to use simple words. You need to use short sentences. And they say, oh, but this is dumbing it down. The point is that it's not, because the law is so hard in and of itself. So you want to make it as simple as possible for the reader to understand all the legal concepts rather than it be like the whole act is figuring out, this lofty long sentences and stuff like that. And brevity, I mean, that just means writing more succinctly and not using extra words. There's the famous quote, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time, because most of the time we draft and it's very long and then we have to shorten it for a page limit. But back to your reader is busy and they're trying to get the information. So if you remember that, your reader doesn't have time for the flowery words and the whatever. They just want to get to the point. So if you focus on these three things, you're going to make your reader happy, which is the goal.
I love it. And I appreciate that quote. And it's true. And I think what I'm hearing and what I think is really key for our listeners, especially the junior lawyers, is that idea that it takes time. The digesting of the law and the figuring it out and gaining that clarity like you were talking about, right? That takes time on the part of the person who is doing the legal writing. And it's that digestion and the packaging that then makes it easier for the person who's at the receiving end. So the audience, the reader, now has a fully formed argument or brief or whatever it is. And so it's not necessarily that you distinguished, simple versus simplistic, right? It's a complex area of law potentially, but the way it's explained is easier for that person to interpret, to digest, because you've done the work for them. So I think what I'm hearing is that for the lawyers who are junior, they're starting out, is taking the time to figure out how to do this thing, how to write this product, whatever it is, using what you've described, right? The clarity, simplicity, brevity, and that will take time on their part and understanding on their part in terms of exactly what it is that they're trying to communicate. So thank you. The next question I have for you, Amanda, is one that I think a lot of lawyers relate to because it's about perfectionism. And I think a lot of lawyers are perfectionists, right? It's a profession that attracts people who really want that perfection. When it comes to writing, though, that can also create procrastination, right? When you're so scared of producing something that isn't perfect, you start spinning your wheels and putting things off. So have you got any suggestions or recommendations for lawyers, students who are becoming lawyers, on how to deal with writer's block or procrastination?
Yeah, Brian Garner has a really good 4-step formula called the Flowers Paradigm. And it talks about breaking up any writing project into 4 stages. If you do that, you will write more quickly and you won't have time to procrastinate because you'll need to start in stage 1. Stage 1 is I call it the muse. It was originally the madman, but that's where you get all your ideas down. And the focus is, you may be writing in your scrap paper trying to teach yourself it, but you need to get all your ideas down messy first and in draft. And then before you try to go polish it and write in the actual brief, you want to try to get a rough outline. And that's stage 2 when you give it to the architect. And Garner talks about when you're building a house, you're not going to go paint a wall until you know where the wall's going to be. If you don't know what floor a bedroom's going to be on, you can't worry about how to do the floor because you're going to have to take it up if you move the bedroom. So you start thinking, then you give it to the architect before you do the outline. Then the 3rd stage is the builder or the writer who fills out the walls and writes it. And then the last stage is the editor. And if you can keep your editor out while you're drafting, that helps so much. Even if you don't remember the whole paradigm, separate your editor and your writer. And if you do that, then you won't be second guessing each word you write down because you've got a whole stage of editing coming up. So you can just write, you're making typos, you're typing fast, it's flowing, keep going. Then go back because it saves so much time. If you try to do them both at the same time, you get nowhere and you end up in tears, as I've certainly been at, legal writing's tough. We've all had our briefs that have put us in tears. But I think that keeping the editor out till the end and making that almost a non-personal thing, no judgment on you. It's like, okay, now we're editing, we're going to come in and it's neutral. It's like, okay, we're not going to judge the mistakes. We're just going to fix everything as if we were fixing someone else's project and, use checklists, follow all the ways you can prove. And then at the end, once you've done all that, there's a point at which you need to say done is better than perfect, and that you need to put in a serviceable brief that looks like you cared. And if it's not perfect, the partner's going to probably fix and change it anyway. But it's more important to get it done. And so there's a tension. But if you go through each step and you do your thing, each stage as well as possible, then you'll know you've done the best you can. And then if it's not perfect, that's okay. Nothing's ever going to be perfect.
Amanda, I need to thank you for that answer. It is so great. There's the model, this paradigm, the 4-part framework, which is fabulous. Thank you for describing it. You also mentioned that in our earlier episode. So anyone who wants to learn more can go back to that. So what I appreciate as someone who helps people a lot with procrastination is you breaking it into stages, right? So anytime we're procrastinating, if we can break the task down into small enough pieces, that makes it more manageable. It helps us overcome that big block, that procrastination. And what you shared about the editor is brilliant. And if anybody takes anything from today's episode that will help them in life, it is the idea of the editor, stage 4. And as you're describing it, I had this image in my mind of I was building a house and there was this person banging on the door and I'm like, no, editor, you can stay out for now. You're not allowed in until this whole thing is done, because you're absolutely right. It's the editor standing over your shoulder who's commenting on every word that's being written on your computer screen. And if you've got that editor and it's putting the brakes on as you're trying to get your ideas out, you're going to be moving so much slower, and it's going to be so much harder to do that work we were talking about earlier, right? That thinking, that digesting, that processing. So if nothing else, I mean, for sure, that is an image that I'm going to hold dear next time I'm sitting and procrastinating and suffering from writer's block, is the editor just has to stay outside for a little while. So thank you for that. Love it. Switching to the topic of mentorship. This is, again, something that I think all lawyers really should have in their lives, people who are ahead of them, people who can support them, nurture them, mentor them. And when it comes to legal writing, I would think that there's a particularly important role that a mentor could play in helping you with the way that you develop your style, the way that you write, your legal work. What are your tips for finding somebody who could be your mentor?
Well, you are going to get assigned a mentor. That's the first thing. You may get assigned 2, one associate and one partner. That's one thing. Great. Lean on them as much as they'll do for you if you get along with them. I mean, it's awkward. You're often matched up with someone. But then think about a real mentor, I call someone who wants to do the mentor job. And I think you need to make it known to everyone in your firm that you are a legal writing enthusiast, that you want to get better, that you love legal writing. You know you have so much to learn, but this is what you want to do, and make it known. And once you make it known that you want to learn and you're eager, you will find people who are so excited to teach. I mean, I would have been one. I love nurturing a new writer. I mean, that's my favorite thing to do. I just love it. But if it's someone who's just sort of, oh God, I just want to get it in and get done so I can go home, and they don't care about the product, they're just doing it because it's an assignment that has to be done, then you're not going to attract a mentor who's going to spend any time with you.
You're so right. The idea that if you talk about it and you express an interest in it, people's ears perk up, right? It's like they hear that in you. And as you're describing it, I was thinking, of course, I mean, if someone came to you, I think about some of the posts that I've read that you've put on LinkedIn, right? The IE versus EG. And, it's something that it's almost like a dog whistle, right? People who are really interested in that topic, they're going to hear it and they're going to want to talk about it more. And so if you're setting that intention, you're talking to people in your firm and they learn that you're interested in legal writing and really improving it, it's natural, right? You've got that thing in common. They're going to want to help you out. So I think that's a great idea. I also love what you said about assigned mentors versus the mentors that you find. And not to say that you're not going to be assigned an amazing mentor who will be a great mentor for you, but I don't love the idea of limiting yourself to the people who have been assigned to you because you may be missing out on some really great opportunities. In terms of speed, right? And I think we all wish that we had the skills of a senior lawyer when we first start out, and it takes time to get there. Any thoughts on how you can develop your skills a little bit faster?
Well, I found the most helpful thing was reading really good legal writing. The more briefs that I read by really top writers, the better my writing got because I started to incorporate their style and tone. And it's amazing. I mean, there's some brilliant writers out there in our country, and there's a great book, Point Made by Ross Guberman, that collects 50 of them and the great Supreme Court advocates. And he goes through their briefs and analyzes them. And so that book's very hard to read. It's a great book. I recommend to all, but it's very hard to read. It's not like a book you have fun reading. But you could take a couple names from there and say, okay, like Lisa Blatt is someone because she was one of the few women in the list. And so I was drawn to her and I pulled, 20 of her briefs and read them. And I picked up so much. I would like her transition sentences, the way she would do things. I mean, that's how you start to become a better writer. And it takes time. So you got to be excited about it. I think that the more you can know about the great writers and start to learn about them and their personalities and what they're doing, you will get the bug because you'll want to be better. So start to get the bug, get on LinkedIn. There's a huge legal writing community on LinkedIn that has just exploded since I started in 2021. I mean, I could name 10 names to follow to get better at legal writing. Read their posts. They all write very clear, helpful posts, and you could learn so much. So those are my two biggest recommendations.
Brilliant. Amanda, I'm going to ask you a question because as you were describing this idea of reading really excellent writing, what came to mind for me is this idea of how do you actively read something like that? Because I can look at a painting and say, wow, that's a really great painting. I can look at lots of really great paintings, but it won't necessarily make me a better painter. So I'm curious to know what you're doing in your mind when you're reading something and you're actually becoming a better writer as a result of having been reading. What are some of the things that you're doing, maybe unconsciously, that are helping you write better as a result of reading?
Well, you've got to be a really active reader. And so you're not reading just for pleasure to just read. You're reading to study that writing. So have a pen or pencil in hand, circle the phrases that you like, or maybe there's words you've never seen before. Go look them up. And then let's say they explain a court decision and you don't really understand it, but it's in your area of law. Then go read the court decision, read their brief again, read what the other side says about it. And you will see the different ways that people use words to explain things. And we're all much better readers than we are writers. I mean, you read great writing, it dances off the page, but could you produce it? No, right? But if you are reading, briefs are more formulaic. There's always the transition sentences and the summary sentences. So some of those are pretty easy to pick up. I mean, so it's not as hard as with a painting because, yeah, I'm with you. I can't paint.
That would be a whole other episode. Amanda, please tell us what resources. You mentioned this book by, was it Rob Guberman?
Oh, it's Ross Guberman. Yeah, it's a great book. Some law schools use it. Some advanced legal writing classes use it. I find it very difficult. I'm through most of it. I mean, I'm taking notes on it. I'm going back. I mean, I'm doing it the slow way. But the easiest book on legal writing that exists on the market, and I am 100% confident of this because I wrote the book, is called Dear 1L, Notes to Nurture a New Legal Writer. And that has about 35 writing rules told in a lighthearted, fun way with tons of examples that you will understand. You'll be like, oh, that makes sense. And it's an enjoyable book. So although there are some things in there that are targeted for people starting law school, which you could skip, the whole second half of it is about writing. There's a 30-point checklist for editing. It's just very helpful. The second book is a new book that I really like called The Case for Effective Legal Writing. And what it does is it goes through, it finds every single court decision where a grammar or usage or punctuation issue has caused ambiguity and led to a court decision, including all the way up to the Supreme Court. I mean, there's Supreme Court cases about lots of little detailed things. So I think that book is easy to read, and you will get a flavor for why all this stuff is important, so that if you're you can really, you're like, whoa, that missing Oxford comma cost that company $5 million. Suddenly these things start to take on more importance. And I think that's really good. And it's a great resource to have. In terms of practicing, my favorite book is Brian Garner's Legal Writing in Plain English, and he's got a third edition of it now. And it's just really good. He's a brilliant writer, and it gives you lots of exercises to do on your own. So that can be helpful.
Brilliant. And thank you for highlighting that you have a book, Amanda, the Dear 1L. Is that Notes to Nurture?
Yeah, we call a first-year law student a 1L in this country, in US. I think it's L1 in some other countries. So yeah, and that is, I don't know, a grouping of posts and checklists and templates and charts that I created over the past 3 years that I put into a narrative form that follows the chronology of the first year of law school. And so it makes sense story-wise. And it's got easier stuff at the beginning, and then it gets more advanced. And by the end, you're learning things that most partners at law firms don't know. So you're getting the best of the best.
Perfect. And we'll link to the book in the notes that come along with the episode. And we'll also put a link to your LinkedIn profile for anybody who is not already following you to go and check you out, because that's also a really great place to learn some more.
And I have a secret resource that I got to tell you about. So this is crazy, probably, because I shouldn't be doing this, but every single LinkedIn post I've ever done in 4 years is saved and available to the public on my website. I have an archive that is word searchable. So if you want to look up who versus whom, or which versus that, or effect versus affect, just plug it in and you'll get everything I've written about it. And it's right there. It's easier because LinkedIn, if it's an older post, sometimes it's very hard to find in the search feature. And so I recommend going directly to my website because it's all organized for you. And that way you'll just know it as a resource that you can always check.
Brilliant. And we'll link to that as well in the notes. And the examples that you gave all sounded very exciting to me. So you can imagine what I'm going to be doing when we finish our recording today, going and checking out affect versus effect and all those things. Super fun. Turning to the next sort of theme for our episode today, in terms of experience, right? You hear people talking about finding their voice. When can you expect that you're going to come into your own as a legal writer and find your voice?
Well, the late Justice Scalia, has a wonderful quote and a big speech he did that I have a book of his speeches. And he says, to become a great legal writer, what do you need? Time and sweat. And it's just so true, because you learn through doing it and getting your writing beaten up by partners, and then getting better and learning. And I wish that it was taught in a more positive way, where we're going to teach you all the mistakes in advance so you don't make them. Unfortunately, you get to a law firm, and if you don't do something right, the assumption is that you're stupid and wrong, rather than that no one told you that, which is much more often the case. So, but it really is. You need to just sort of live with the words and be in it. And it's hard because it takes a long time. You'll find your voice in some forums easily. Like if you're doing a lot of discovery requests, you're going to be fine. After the first one, you're going to know exactly what tone to use. First time you do, a position paper to an agency, you're going to be awkward, but then the next time you won't, because you'll have done it. But every time you write to a new forum, a new agency, whether it's appeal court or trial court or U.S. Supreme Court, it's just a different tone, and you won't have your voice yet. And so what you just have to accept is that it is a lifelong learning journey, and that you've got to just sign up for it. But it's so great. And if you love it and you get into it, you'll get really good faster, because you'll see things and you'll want to look at them because you're trying to master it. And there'll still be things you don't know, because it's a universe that's hard to put a circle around and contain. I just encourage people. I love it. It's made my whole career. It's always been something that I could rely on. And for a long time, I was working remotely at a big firm and I was the brief writer. And, unless they could count on me to write the great briefs, they would not have been letting me work at home in 1999, and back in those years. So it can really be an asset that will help you. And it's also so useful no matter what you do. What if you don't want to be a lawyer anymore and you want to go do something else? Your writing skills, being able to communicate clearly will be everything. I don't even care. AI is going to take over. It's going to be the people who can communicate with each other who are going to come out on top. So I don't know. That's a long answer, but your voice will come along the way for certain reasons, and then you'll still be looking for it for other settings.
Love it. And I think setting that expectation is so helpful, that sweat and time, right? These are your friend. It reminds me of this idea of growth mindset, right? Looking at your learning through the lens of growth mindset. If it's challenging, that's a good thing. It means you're learning, you're getting smarter, versus that fixed mindset. If it's hard, you should avoid it. This is something that it's a lifelong process. So love that. And it reminds me of something that one of my former mentors used to say. He used to talk about sitting on blisters, which is such an ugly image. Yet it's the blisters, as you mentioned, right? It's having your writing scrutinized and beat up, but it can be a really helpful way to learn. So I think it's also encouraging to know if you're getting memos back with red ink all over them, that's red ink that you can now learn from. Somebody's giving you feedback, and whether or not you choose to write in the style of the people who are ultimately your editors or your critics or whatever, you can decide that. But certainly the feedback is going to be helpful. So,
and also I will say that the partners in law firms who give this feedback are not teachers. They're not very good at giving feedback. And they may be too busy to treat you with the type of respect and calm that you want. And you just need to know that's part of it. And that's probably how they were trained. And they, got short words and just fix this type thing. When I work with people, I try to have it be a positive experience. Like, let me teach you 3 things. Now let's go look at the sentences. Now that you know that you need a comma in a series, how might you change your sentence so that it's a positive reinforcement that's encouraging rather than the you got it wrong?
Absolutely. Amanda, one last question for you before we wrap up today's podcast episode, which is such a pleasure to speak with you. What gets easier over time and what doesn't get easier over time?
Well, the writing gets easier because you start to get more. There's a good quote. It says, competence builds confidence. So the more things you know how to do, the more confident you're going to feel about it. And it builds on itself. So that definitely gets easier. You also learn not to be so sensitive and not to take such pride in your writing, and to just realize that, look, this is just legal writing. It has to be done a certain way for lawyers. If that helps you, take it out of the realm of I'm not good or I don't write well. Just, you got to learn a certain way to write. What doesn't get easier is that there's always a new place. Toward the very end of my career, when I was on top of the world and all cocky about my writing, I had to write my first petition for certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's just a whole other animal. And I must have spent, 2 weeks killing myself writing this thing. And I don't know that they saved a word. They started from scratch. It just was wrong for the context. It was humiliating, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? That's just, you have to know it's a different form. You've never done it before. You're going to make mistakes.
Beautiful. It is a lifelong process. Love it. Amanda, thank you so much. You have shared so many wonderful suggestions and tips and tricks and advice for the lawyers, the students who want to become better legal writers, regardless of where they're starting from. How do we find you and how can we work with you?
So my website is dear1l.com, DEAR1L. Very easy to find. It's the same name as my book, which is purposeful. It's just very easy. And there's a link button to contact me directly. I hang out on LinkedIn a lot. I do answer my DMs. I'm very good about answering DMs. So you can reach out there too. But through the website is the easiest and the surest way that I'll definitely get back to you. So that's what I would recommend.
Brilliant.
And I've got courses coming out this summer.
Okay. Let's hear more.
Yeah, I'm working on courses for this summer. So those are going to be available. And I'm just trying to work really fast to get them done for this summer. And so that will be, and I'll announce it on LinkedIn. And I do have a link, which I can send you to, if for anyone who would like to sign up to get notice about when the courses are available. So that could be helpful to make available too.
Fantastic. And Amanda, I'm on your newsletter. You produce a fabulous newsletter. I assume you would also include information about your upcoming courses if somebody is signed up to receive your newsletters?
Yeah, so I definitely will.
Beautiful. So sign up for Amanda's newsletter. We'll make sure there's
3 bullets
in the notes as well.
We'll talk about the name of it and that in another episode and whether I want to.
I would love to have you back. So
all right.
Thank you again, Amanda. Thank you everybody who tuned in today and had a listen to today's conversation. It's been a pleasure having you here and hope everyone is back again next week. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.